This is Rosemary Armao. Welcome back to On the Brink. I want to talk today about the student protests. By the time this airs, we're taping it on May 9th, they may be over. Certainly school administrators want them all to be over. They're hoping you just go home for the summer and forget about it all. But I think there are deep implications to the way this has been handled, to the implications of it, to what happens in the future. And I brought a really interesting crew aboard to talk about it. You'll recognize Bazan Jaber. She's been on before. You'll remember when troubles first started in Gaza. She is a student from Amman, Jordan, now studying at Georgetown University. Lots of J sounds there. I can't believe I got through that without stuttering, Bazan. And she is a rabble-rouser here. She was outspoken, as you remember, the first time. Now she's actually engaged organizing and working on the encampment in Washington involving students from several universities. And the second speaker with us right now is Corey Morgan. Oh, and we have a surprise visitor, Tanoa Morgan. They are a husband and wife duo. They're adorably sweet. They still like each other after years together. They have raised two amazing daughters. I mean, they're like so talented. It's unbelievable. More importantly, both of them are loud voices, smart, snarky voices for social justice. And I have to mention, sorry to bring this up, but it is relevant in this case. They are both African American, and so they are here because I want to make a connection with the Black Lives Matter movement, demonstrations that they care about. I don't know, do you care about it more than you do about the ones for Gaza? They're similar. Corey, what do you think?
Care about it more? I mean, that's a difficult question, but I certainly care about especially the students being able to voice their beliefs and not be held back and told what they can and can't say.
Right.
So in each of those the struggles are remarkably similar.
Right. So has been the response from authorities, I would say, that the demonstrators are all being painted as a bloc as anti-Semitic, out of control, violent. We have to suppress them. It just really seems the same to me. Black Lives Matter. I'm not going to sit here and say there are no anti-Semitic protesters now, just as I would not say there were not some violent protesters at Black Lives Matter. But to paint the whole movement in that way is just inaccurate. So, Bazan, let's start with you. Describe what you've been doing since we saw you last. You've been engaged in putting together an encampment. What does that entail?
I would like to start first with the expression of violent protest and object to it. I think we need to start there, right? There's a lot to be said about any form of protest and objection and social movements, and easily described, dismissed as violent. And this is, I think, where we need to begin the conversation. What I have been doing, or maybe I should actually just explain myself a little bit more. Protests are meant to disturb, and they are meant to be loud and be clear. And if people are not heard, they will bang some, kitchen pots and tell people to listen and force them to listen. That's, I think, why I think I need to think critically about what is described as violent. What is violent is what the state of Israel has been doing to Palestinians. That's what really has been hurting us all. And myself as a Palestinian, there's more than an obligation to fight in any way possible. And there's also some room here in the US as a graduate student, right? So what we've been doing, we've been calling on our administrations and demanding accountability, and we're demanding clarity, right? So the whole student movement is asking to divest and disclose and boycott any kind of financial, academic, any kind of business ties with Israeli universities. The demand is not too much, right? Students are part of the institution. They're basically asking not to be participants, not to be complicit in a genocide. And for that reason, students have been organizing. What we've been doing really quickly, It all started with Columbia University with the first encampment, and soon after SGPs and groups that are kind of similar to SGP or with the same mandate across the US have been actually organizing for this for over 3 months. This is a lot of work. I must say that, give so much credit for everybody who's been involved. So much faculty support, everybody you can think of has been like on board with this. For the DMV area in DC, we have coordinated with also a group that's called DMV SGP, and SGPs are social justice, so groups for social justice in Palestine, and these are chapters across universities, right? So the one on mine, we have a graduate student, and it's called SWANA Coalition, and the SWANA Coalition is also working on issues of social justice inside of the US, but really mainly focused on for international students and other students that are based here, really focused on like MENA issues, right? The Middle East. So the first thing is hands off the Middle East. You've heard this over and over. And that's where a lot of our political action is motivated from or pushed through, fueled from. What we've been doing too is kind of, it was put off kind of yesterday. The whole encampment at George Washington was shut down yesterday very violently. Over 30, if I'm not mistaken, students were arrested, and then they were all released eventually. We put funding because everybody knew there will be arrests. People have worked really hard. It was when like I can go on, but my role specifically was the rally and the organizing to have students and faculty join from Georgetown University to George Washington University, and we did the march together.
Well, let me say, have you not had an effect? I mean, right now we are listening to Biden say, stay out of Rafah, or we are not going to send you any more arms, which I shouldn't be doing anyway, I think. But is that a result of he's listening to young people who are increasingly disenchanted with his embrace Israel at all costs kind of policy? Do you feel like you've had an effect? No.
I don't think the administration in the US is listening. If it was listening, it would have listened already. And after 40,000 people died with tax money from the US?
Yeah.
I think that the movement is not naive, and I must say this over and over, because I had people on TV ask me this question over and over. The students know very well the limitations of what kind of BDS movement they support or they're part of, right? And for that reason, they're working with what they can do. And you have some successful examples of at least, administration agreeing to vote on boycott, right? Vote on
this. Brown University recently settled with their students. Sorry, I just want to explain to people who don't know that Brown University agreed that they would meet with students and would discuss, at least, they'll probably vote it down, would be my guess, but at least they're going to discuss divesting in U.S. arms dealers and Israeli warmongering companies. So that's an advance. Corey, let me switch to you for a minute. The murder of George Floyd made Black Lives Matter explode. It was almost spontaneous outbreak of demonstrations across the country. Are you surprised that the attack, the Hamas attack on Israel and the subsequent retaliation way above board in Gaza sparked that same sort of response in students? These are the biggest.
No, I am not surprised at all. The protests after George Floyd's murder. I mean, that wasn't the first time we saw that sort of a public uprising. It was just the first time people had no choice but to watch it, because we were in COVID. We were all at home. We had nothing in front of us but our screens, our phones, and our TVs. We couldn't ignore it by going out. We couldn't ignore it by going to work. It was there for everybody to see. And the protests that went on, the attention that it got was, it was fantastic. It was, I would wish that a man didn't have to die so violently in order for so much of the world to see what was going on a daily basis in our community. But the fact that it happened and the timing of it made it such that people couldn't help but pay attention. It was similar to during the civil rights movement when the police were turning the fire hoses on folks. That tended that more than a lot of other things started turning the tide as far as the traction that the movement was getting, because this was happening on television. Television was new.
Right.
People were seeing this, and now it was no longer a matter of, folk explaining it away. We'd say, because it happens now, we talk about black folks getting, harassed by the police, and people generally say, oh, they're just blowing it out of proportion. Oh, if they would have just, it couldn't have happened that bad. But when it's on TV and you're seeing, dogs being sicked on 60-year-old women and, hosing down children, all this stuff, the violence of it, there was no place anybody could go to ignore it. And it was the same thing with George Floyd's murder. That that sparked it relit the movement.
And moreover, I want to say, really, I think that both of those instances, what it was white America seeing it. Black America already knew.
Yeah.
But it was like truth. White America had to pay attention. White America had to acknowledge what was happening and what their black friends have been saying all along, but they just didn't believe because it does not happen to them. So I definitely believe much more so than what it is or was for the black community. It was white America having their eyes open. Thus the notation that they say of being woke.
Yes.
Waking up to find out that this is America and that this is what America does, and that it treats its citizens differently based on the color of their skin.
One of the things that it used to upset me so much, and it still does, when I would hear folk say, "When did America become this?" And I'm like, this is America. This is who America's always been. It's just happening live on video. It's not something, it's not just being told in stories, that your friends at work are talking about, and you say, oh, it can't be that bad. This is who America's always been, but now you get to see it for yourself, and you get to see us experiencing it. And I applaud the students as well as the faculty on these schools who, have picked that, they picked up that baton and ran with it. Because one of the things that we knew, as Black people knew, is that this, that movement, this movement that took place, the protests and things that took place, it was not going to last forever. Some new shiny object was going to come up and cause people to no longer pay attention. And the media and society, the government, they were in a rush to put as many shiny objects in front of us as possible to make this stop as soon as it could. But, it was right below the surface. Right, it was right below the surface as far as students and especially young people getting right back out there when they see an injustice that can't be ignored. So my hats off to them. I'm glad they're out there. Of course, obviously, like Basan said, I'm not going to co-sign deliberate violence or anything, because that's not what Black Lives Matter protesters were about, and that's not what what she's advocating here. But I'm definitely all for the folks out there getting their voices heard and getting that other side of that story out there.
You are listening to Tanoa and Corey Morgan. They live in Maryland. She is a former reporter. He is a former government worker. They both are long time and come from a family of outspoken civil rights and social justice advocates. Tanoa, you've been following the student protests?
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want you to talk for a minute about the media. Elsewhere in this program, we'll talk about, I think they're doing a terrible job. It seems very one-sided, giving way too much weight to what administrators and law enforcement officials are saying. Outside agitators, I sure don't believe that. It's same outside agitators that were Black Lives Matter. It's just it's just irresponsible to me when I look at it, and I wonder if you feel the same. Push back if you don't.
So I feel like this. Well, let me just say this. This is one point that I wanted to make when Corey was talking and making his point, and we kind of making correlations between especially the George Floyd movement and this one. When we said, people are saying, "Oh, I can't believe that America's like this," and Black America is saying, "This is America. This is the same America it's always been." America, and I mean, I guess just like any other country, takes sides, right? And very often, the sides that it chooses to take, again, is based on the color of one's skin. And so, you hear, I was absolutely astounded at how quickly like how much what we hear from this protest, how it's gone from, students are protesting, they're supporting Hamas, to this, Israel can't defend itself, and we have to stop this hatred against Israel, and and all this kind of thing. Now, I will say hatred is wrong in all forms, point blank, period, right? But I never hear politicians, I never hear the president of the United States saying we have to stop this hatred against Black people.
Or against hatred against Palestinians. You never hear Joe Biden saying we have to help Palestine.
You never hear that.
Right.
There are certain people who this country chooses to defend, and certain people who they don't. You never hear we got to stop hatred against Africans. You don't even hear we got to stop hatred against Latin Americans.
Yep, it's true. Bazan, jump in here. I think what she's saying is exactly right. I actually began asking her about the media. So jump in on that, and about statements from the government, which have not been, they've been all in support of Israel.
Is it today or yesterday that Clinton came out to say that students do not know the history of the Middle East, and they're so
Clinton?
Uneducated.
Which Clinton?
Hillary Clinton. And I think it's so ironic. It is because this movement is absolutely, I think it's also rude, but this movement is very absolutely driven by knowledge about history, specifically knowledge that it's history based and about history, right? Like in classrooms in the US, and I'm here for education, and I know it's one of the best globally, right? In the US, often, in a lot of classrooms, students are taught whitewashed history, absolutely whitewashed, really siding with colonizer, not even recognizing enough that this is a settler colonial state in itself, right? So, and even when you're taught social movements, it's mainly like, especially the civil rights movement, it's mainly celebrating, oh my God, the times people celebrated Martin Luther King, right? Because it's just, you're given this like fallacy, right? That the social movements were driven by this heroic, one-leaded, oh my God, president, right? This is how it's supposed to be. This is what people are fed here, lies. When in fact, it was that invisible labor. It was that everyday disruption. It was the people who survived violence in the US. In every interview, people are like, well, police came and they like against protesters. I was like, this is the biggest arm dealer in the globe. Like this is the government that makes money off weapons. What are you expecting, right? So it's not just simply, I think, picking sides. I just want to add to it the fact that there's a good business deal with Israel. This is why we're asking for boycott and divest. It's not just about, it's our skin are absolutely, like as brown people like myself, right? And then others are absolutely all the time dehumanized. We're just here for the labor to build this country, right? Like this is what people did here. That's what Black people did. They built it. And then they were called, like when they fought for their rights, this is the way I understand it, and it's not my place to speak, but really the way I understand it is that people really built every brick here. And then when they demanded their right, lost lives, really fought physically in every way possible to just be equal. it was celebrated as it was given to them, not that they took it. That the fact that the people took it by force and by violence, by non-violence, by demonstrating, by hunger striking, in every way people protested, right? As a Palestinian, we learned from Black liberation movement. I read June Jordan poetry and cry. I learned from Angela Davis. There are Palestinians back home that have Angela Davis tattooed on their body. So there is a lot that we've learned from one another, and it is about history. It really is about history. And this is why every interview I get asked, why is police here? And I'm like, well, there's defund police. It's been a movement. Why are we surprised? It has been violently, literally. I mean, what's really so unique about this specific movement is the fact that it is white, rich kids from Columbia, Ivy League universities, really getting upset. This is what it is about. What it is about is the fact that there is a complete reconstruction of what the Jewish community in the US, especially the younger generation, looks like today. This is what's happening in the US. And this is why it's a threat, because it is a threat to big corporates of technology and arms and weapons. Mm-hmm. That's it. That's why it's a threat. That's why you need to shut it down, right? I mean, the fact that in DC, a city that really witnessed violence, right? This is why the fact that we have Black skin next to us in the encampment perhaps was the reason why we were protected or left alone to stay for like over 10 days in the encampment. The fact that DC police refused to interfere when the university administration required that they do. Why? Because these people know exactly what dark history there is in DC. That's the truth. And students are not, we knew this. We knew this before we planned it. Everybody knew. People know their power and they know their history. And this is why they've been mobilizing. So there's no way people are going to forget this and go back home. This has been piling up. It's the fact that what you guys said today, it's the fact that we've known America more than Americans have, white Americans have, right? Someone who entire history, population, people, my cause, my land is taken away because of American support, because of American foreign policy, understand America in a way that white Americans will never be able to understand. And only now that I shoulder them the responsibility that they understand.
Mr. and Mrs. Morgan, are you feeling, is this resonating with you, what Bazan is saying?
The history of colonization, it is, I think, something that every Black American, really, probably every Black around the world knows and understands.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we feel that that is part of the part of the unwritten history of this and so many other countries. Mm-hmm. It's not even just the United States, but yeah, absolutely, I feel it. And again, I can't applaud enough what these young folks are doing out there, and I'm glad they're out. And it is a shame that it doesn't take much for a lot of the pundits and the media to classify the entire movement as violent in order to discredit an entire movement. We've seen it.
Yeah, that's a playbook. That's an old playbook.
Mm-hmm. This has been great. We are running out of some time. I have one last question for each of you. For Corey and to Noah, I want to know, as Americans, if you think the right to protest, a constitutionally protected First Amendment mentioned right, is in danger. I am seeing laws under consideration across the country that restricts what journalists can do to cover, what restrictions are allowed to be put on protesters in the name of, peace and order. Are you worried about that?
Well, absolutely. I mean, as a Black American, we have always been worried about that. that is something, the right to protest and the right to speak out is not a right that that they want everybody to have.
Yeah.
Our country was founded on protest. The Boston Tea Party is celebrated. That it is celebrated. It is in all of the history books. But it was a protest, a violent protest that broke laws, and these folks were, would have been considered thugs and agitators if they had skin like mine.
Or if they hadn't won.
Yeah, or if they hadn't won, because that's who writes the story.
Right.
But we have now, just even within the last couple of years, they've rioting and violent protesting is even considered okay, depending on depending on who's protesting and who's writing the laws about it. I mean,
those January 6th rioters were patriots, right? In the view of some.
Yeah, patriots they were just taking a nice little tour of the Capitol building that day, is from what I understand.
And defecating in its halls.
Yeah.
I do that. I do that whenever I visit tourist places.
That's what you do. That's part of the tour. But it's amazing how if you had black folks protesting outside near the White House that day when they got tear gas so Trump could take a picture in front of a church with a Bible held upside down.
Right.
And I mean, in all fairness, he's never read the Bible, so he probably didn't really know that was upside down. May have been the first time he's ever handled one. But the police presence there, and I was at that. My oldest daughter Noelle and I were at that exact location with the protesters the following day, and it was just as crowded. And we had our exit strategy all set in case the tear gas came back. But that police presence was not there in that forceful on January 6th, when there were more people at the Capitol and violence actually did take place. So yes, we have always been concerned about that right to free speech, because it's not handled across the board to everybody. Yeah. And we know as black and brown people that we will be the first ones who that right will be taken away from.
Yeah. If I can add just a little bit, free speech is only available in a free country to free people. And the path that Trump took us down, and undoubtedly would again if he were allowed, handed the reins of this country, would not be a path of freedom. It is not as if the right to free speech and the right to peaceful protest, like I said, that's only allowed to free people. There were laws on the books preventing Blacks from congregating more than 4 people at a time, specifically because they didn't want, they certainly didn't want slaves, and they didn't want, free Black folks either. They just didn't even want us to come together, because if we came together, there might be a protest, or there might be quote unquote trouble. So that's only available to free people. And if we're not in a free country, you don't have a free press, and you don't have the freedom to have your opinion. I mean, the freedom to protest.
They put that law back on the books in Florida about if 3 or more black people, I ain't say black people, that's what they meant. 3 or more people were together in any given, that can be considered, a riot, and can be forcefully broken up by the police.
Charming. Bazan, you're getting the last word today, and my question for you to answer is, what do you see ahead for Palestine? And I mean both in Gaza and the student protests here.
I don't think I can answer this question thinking of Gaza. It's just, like when this started, like back in October, I would tell my community here when they were trying to organize and every rally and every protest every week that Gaza is gone. As a Palestinian, Like, we knew exactly what was going on. We knew that this government will proceed with their operation, and they just needed a justification to try to take over Gaza for all the reasons, and we can explain them at a certain point of time. So yeah, Gaza's gone, and people died, and they're under the rebels, and then we're still discovering mass graves. So I don't know if there's any hope for Gaza. But what I have hope for is here. Yeah. And just the community, and hoping that the boycott movement will make change. And yeah, eventually, South Africa apartheid ended, and why history proved that it was done before, and it might be done again,
Mm-hmm. There's hope. And with that, I'm going to conclude this. Thank you so much, both Bazan and Tanoa and Corey Morgan. Thank you very much. Please listen to On the Brink on Apple, YouTube, Google, Spotify. Oh, go ahead and think of some other podcast platform that you like. We're there too. You can help us to attract more sponsors and thus more high quality programming by liking us, rating us, in general, by engaging with us on social media. Even call us if you want. This will not cost you anything except a few minutes of your time, and it will make a difference. Segments of On the Brink can be heard weekly on the Hudson Mohawk Magazine, a feature of WOOC Radio, that's 105.3 FM. This magazine is a volunteer-produced local news hour that airs discussions and debates about topics that affect our world. I'm Rosemary Armao. Welcome back to On the Brink. I am very excited today to be talking about an old friend and former colleague, a woman who is as snarky as she is smart. You've met her before. That's Candy Thompson. She's a kind of political reporter still up in Cape Cod, but she was a major editor at the Baltimore Sun when I was there. We're doing this in an odd way. The podcast is being done in an odd way this week. I can't put her together with our other panelists for our taping because she's going to be busy on our taping day. And I'm going to start off by asking if you can tell us a little bit, Candy, about this assignment you have tomorrow. It's an important job and something people ought to be aware of.
Well, it's funny because when you're a journalist, and I was for 45 years, you cover elections, you're not part of elections. You don't put up signs, you don't sign petitions, you don't protest. None of that. So when I retired, kind of the first time, and we moved to Cape Cod, our little town of 20,000 people is on the older side, and the people who work in the polls are older. As a matter of fact, at the age of 70, I'm one of the youngsters. So
that's
I
nice.
volunteer. Yeah, really. I move around and pick things up off the floor and. Yeah.
When I was an editor in Florida, they called me the kid. I love that.
Life made. So, we've got 4 elections this year, and I am one of the volunteer election officials. So I do everything from help send out the early ballots and count the early ballots. And I check in tomorrow. I'll be checking in voters. I'll be running the ballot boxes. And then we'll be counting the early ballots in a separate room. So that's my day. It's 13 hours because we simply don't have enough people to break it up into smaller shifts.
Okay, so why is it that there's not enough people? Do people not know these jobs are there and are needed? People don't want to do it? Or is it because they don't want Rudy Giuliani ruining their life? All of the above?
It's all the above. It's interesting. I did a little research. Women outnumber men 2-1 as election officials. The median age is 64. I believe it's higher here on Cape Cod. And the turnover level is high. People get there, they're jazzed, they're ready to rock. And then, it's a whole day of a slog. You get accused of things. You have suspicious people. You have people who mark their ballots wrong, who take it out on you when they mark their ballots wrong. It's all kinds of things. You really have to want to do it, and you have to feel like you're a part of something much bigger. I was reading up a little bit The election assistance commissioner, his name is Benjamin Hovley. He says the workers at polls are the customer service face of our democracy, which I love.
That's a great quote. How long have you been doing this now?
About 4.5 years now. So this year, my town will have five elections. Tomorrow is our town elections, Thursday. And then we have our presidential primary in June, our state primary in September, our general election in November, and we also have a water district election that has to be. So, it's a busy year and people burn out and people have things to do with their lives. And you do have training. You have to know how to run the machines. You have to know how to ask the questions. You have to be able to answer the questions and deal with all kinds of personality.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people are naturally suspicious. But Mr. Hovland was saying, if you want to know about the integrity of your election, if you want to know about how it's done, how the sausage is made, volunteer one election. And it was an eye-opener to me.
Mm-hmm.
How many safeguards, even in my little 20,000 voter town, how many safeguards are in place? And the two people are looking. And, we count and we double count and we triple count. I was very impressed at this local level. You assume a certain amount of sophistication in a bigger community. But even in my town, our town clerk has caught 3 people trying to vote in different towns.
That's interesting.
And, here he is. He's just a local guy with an assistant, and he takes it very seriously. So I feel good about the integrity of our elections here in Massachusetts at the very least. And I assume it's the same lots of places.
Yeah, I'm thinking in my head whether I should offer special credit to students who volunteer for this. It's a way to get them involved, and I know
it's eye-opening because you see everybody. You see everybody.
Yeah, it's
everybody from the minister to the old person to the school teacher to your elected officials, and you treat them all exactly the same. You don't say, "Oh, you don't have to show me ID and cut the line." Everybody,
it has to do it. Yeah,
it feels good.
My dad did this for years. He's been gone for 24 years. We'd go to vote, and some of the workers there still say, "Oh, I remember your dad," because, as you say, it was all women, and he was this charming, funny man, and the donuts were good.
See, I wish we had the donuts, but I'm bringing tomorrow's Trader Joe's pastries.
Oh, that's not bad. That's not bad at all.
Oh.
Well, okay, you're an old timer as I am, and I want to know, Candy, if you feel at all like you're being transported back into the 70s when you see and read about students protesting on campuses.
It really does. It's right there. Because I knew I was coming to talk to you, I went and counted how many times I've been gassed. Okay, because let's face it, this is our background. How many times was I gassed? And if you take out the gassing in elementary school that I went through, it's 6 times, half a dozen times. One of them was actually covering a demonstration, and the bulk of them though were taking part in Vietnam and some civil rights stuff. And we expected to be gassed. I mean, that was if you didn't get gassed, it's
you weren't living. You weren't carrying your. What did you get gassed for in elementary school?
Well,
I have to ask.
Well, they took us to the town hall complex, and we went through town hall and met the mayor, and then we went to the fire station and we rang the bell, and and then we went to the police station where they put us in the cell and they let us try on handcuffs, and then the sergeant took us into the room with the weapons. And he shows us a shotgun, and he pulls out a tear gas canister, and it goes off in his hand.
Oh my gosh.
He gassed my entire class, the teachers, the chaperones. We all ended up in Orange Memorial Hospital being treated for tear gas.
Okay, now that's a story I never expected to get today. That's amazing. It's awful. Can you imagine if that happened now? Wow.
Well, I know my father got the call, and it's the mayor is apologizing before he even says what's going on. And my father's like, for Christ's sake, tell me what we're talking about here. And he goes, Yeah, the entire class was gassed.
Yes. Oh my God. All right. So you have some empathy for students on campus who,
I do.
all right, let me say my thing first and then you respond to this. I'm horrified by the coverage by the professional media. I am horrified by the police response. I am horrified by the politicians' response. I'm horrified by Joe Biden's response. It's like we have learned nothing since those protests in Vietnam when those students, us, we were right. It was time to re-examine American policy, and that's what those students are doing. And I think they're brave. They are facing being beat up terribly by cops and gassed. They're facing suspension from school, hate from their parents and from the whole nation. It's just appalling. They are the hope of the future, we say. And then they start saying, hey, pay attention, do this a different way. Instead of saying, let's talk about this, you may be right. We're gassing them and seeing in them. Oh, and come on, outside agitators. Who are these outside agitators? Let me know that. So go ahead. No, I've had my rant.
No, I agree with you up until you start breaking things. Because when you break things, you become a mob.
Andy, the charges are trespass. They're putting up tents on the quad, which my students said UAlbany could do tomorrow and nothing would happen. That's not violent.
And I'm all for that. But when you break into Hamilton Hall at Columbia, when you bust things up, that's where you start to lose people. I mean, that's how I feel about it. And maybe it's just a PR thing, but to me, those kids could stay on the lawn as long as they want to. And they can chant and they can have speakers. And if Country Joe and the Fish were still around, I would say, what are we fighting for? 1, 2, 3, right?
Yes.
But that's the only thing that gives me pause is destruction. Because I think you make your point. I think Martin Luther King made his point.
Yeah.
I think lots of people make their points without having to do what the January 6th people did. And I'm not equating the two, but I'm saying that the optic is you're breaking things and you're making it bad for everybody. And otherwise, your First Amendment rights, I'd fight to the death for you for the ability to protest.
I'm torn on this because break-ins and sit-ins in buildings and Columbia even were standard in the 1970s because just as now, the students were not heard. They have made attempts to sit down with the administration. They have made attempts to talk about why are we investing in U.S. arms dealers supporting Israel? Why are we investing in Israeli companies supporting essentially genocide? Not essentially, genocide in Gaza. That's worth talking about, and they have tried, and they've been shut down. So this is civil disobedience. Isn't that part of the American tradition too?
I would circle back around and say that what you're saying shows exactly your point, that the media is doing a sucky job.
Terrible job. Oh, talk about that and then I'll jump in because I got a lot to say about that. It's disgusting.
Well, it's horrible. I mean, it's like they're taking sides. They don't know what they're looking at. The Peggy Noonan story about she sat on a park bench and said, friends, come over and talk to me. 1, they're not friends, Peggy Noonan. 2, they're sources. 3, get off your ass and go over and talk to them if you want them. Don't beckon them like the Queen of England. And the people who are doing their stand-ups and the people who are, talking to administrators only.
Or police. They're talking.
Police.
They're doing one-sided reporting. They are talking to police officials, to the mayor of New York, who has proved not to be very accurate. And they're taking his side, and they're talking to, or I don't know, why are they not talking to students? I'm seeing lots of first-person and opinion articles by students and by faculty supporting students. That is a completely different story. Completely different.
I agree with you. I don't believe a thing I'm watching on television. I don't believe a thing I'm reading in the New York Times. And that's that's a really sad commentary for a journalist to say, I don't believe, And what bothers me is I was just reading the Axios poll that came out, where they interviewed students and they said, what are the most important issues? The Middle East conflict is 8%, is ninth place behind healthcare. I understand that, education funding, but I mean, it's down at the bottom. Why is it down at the bottom? Because it's not being covered in a serious way.
Right, right. Who are they polling in the polls that you're looking at? These
They
are adults or they're college?
They're college students, 2 and 4 year students across the country, plus or minus 2.7%, as far as accuracy. They did 1,200 students. I'm not a big poll fan anyway, no matter what they are. But it is interesting that the kids on campus are saying this isn't a big deal. And the reason it's not a big deal is because it's not being taken seriously.
Well, one of the questions being asked by the journalists, who I don't think are doing a good job, is, well, why are the students protesting this? Why not, say, Syria? Why not Ukraine, where we have, a tremendous one-sided battle against essentially defenseless people? And I'm not sure of the reason for that. To me, Gaza seems different because we're so heavily invested. It feels like Vietnam again.
It does.
I don't know why this awakened students, but I'm glad that it did. I'm the one who's been saying, where are the students? Where are the activists? Stand up and say you care about something. They finally are doing that, and we're knocking them. What lessons?
And quite frankly, during Vietnam, the atrocities, the bombings in Cambodia, the Agent Orange, My Lai was like one of the unusual things covered. We're seeing Gaza live. We're seeing Gaza
absolutely
unfiltered.
Every day.
Yes,
children, and on the other side is really soldiers, extolling their death and destruction. So the students, I'm saying, hey, I have a bigger worry though too. The response to students on campus. It is very similar to the response that we saw a few years ago with Black Lives Matter protests. And there are bills being considered in legislatures across this country right now that limit the First Amendment right to dissent. Journalists are being more restricted. There are more and more kind of laws and regulations being heaped on the right to protest. So basically, you can stand out in the middle of the desert and yell where nobody can hear you and you can protest. But if you're going to do it in an effective way, in other words, in the middle of a big city campus, then you're going to be gassed and beaten. I think this is like another march towards tyranny. I feel we're on another milestone towards that. Is that too elaborate?
Most of our journalism is now corporate journalism. Yep. The New York Times, CNN, ABC. These are corporations. Corporations stick together. They did in Vietnam. They're doing it now. The parallel is amazing. Dick Daley should rise up from his grave and be at the Democratic National Convention.
Yeah, he'd feel right at home. Yeah, he totally would. Okay, and the number one sign of that to me is outside agitators. There was a story out of New York at Columbia. They arrested one of the women as an outside agitator. Who was arrested was the grandmother of a student who had come to see her son, her grandson. That was an outside agitator. And not connected to the university, that means you're not on the roster. You could have just graduated. You could be on hiatus because you haven't paid your bill. You're trying to get financial aid. You could have be a dropout. You could be friends with someone who is on campus. It does not mean that you're Antifa or a communist, which is the way that they are being portrayed. Do you know? Can you name, not a name or a description of any outside agitator who's turned out indeed to be really, like a Palestinian spy or operative? No.
And it takes me back to one night at the dinner table in West Orange, New Jersey. My father, who was a rock rib Republican. My mother was the Shirley Chisholm Democrat. I voted for Shirley Chisholm, my first vote ever in New Jersey. But my father was railing about outside agitators, right? Outside agitators. Oh, these commies. And I go, Dad, I'm an outside agitator.
Mm-hmm.
And he got completely quiet. I go, I am those people you're seeing on TV. And those kids I go to Sunday school with, it's them too, right? And he was like, and it blew his mind. It really did.
Yeah, that's really true. The other group that I've come to admire are the Jewish students on campus who are not saying, oh, I'm afraid, I can't, I'm being intimidated. They're saying, no, we're with the protesters, this is wrong. I think that's really brave. And it puts a lie to the idea that this is some sort of hate speech. And don't get me wrong, I'm not going to sit here and say all those protesters are wonderful, noble little kids. There probably is awful stuff being said. I have no doubt of it. But the argument is ridiculous. It's like us trying to say we have to stop immigration because not every single immigrant coming in is a pure person with no crime or even terrorism in their background. There will be some, but overall, to paint the whole thing, the whole movement, which I think it's becoming, as anti-Semitic,
it's lazy. It's lazy. It's dishonest. It's intellectually dishonest. It's just, and the media is a part of this because it's the easy way to deal with it. And you can be pro-Israeli people and pro-Palestinian people. Those are not mutually exclusive. And yet the media makes no differentiation.
Right. It is very, very simplistic, cutting it down to the basics, and it just doesn't work. Student journalists, especially at Columbia, have been getting a lot of attention because they're not doing this. They're journalists. I know. That gives me same thing. It's like, there we go. There's that hope of the future we talk about. And of course, the other thing everybody is hoping, by everybody, I mean the grown-ups running universities, is that summer vacation is nigh, and so everybody will go home. Do you see that happen? Is that how you see this ending?
And that was the same thing, during Vietnam. It's like, thank God the campuses were empty. And guess what? We had more time on our hands at that point. We actually had summer. And if, we might work at the liquor store, but that gave us tons of time to do the other stuff. And, they didn't count on that and caught flat-footed. So nanny, new. Yeah.
And I want to end with the politics of this. This is not helping Biden. He has not done a great job handling this. He's calling for stand up against anti-Semitism and no peace on campus. And he's not giving, to me, it seems, you can disagree, any credence to the arguments of the pro-Palestinian demonstrators.
It's funny. I said to somebody today, I was getting ready for the election, and I said, remember when Nixon went out and talked to the protesters? Like, when is that?
Wow, that's right.
When is Biden gonna show up at at Columbia and go like, hey kids, and it's gonna be creepy and a throwback, and you and I will get it. And
oh wow, that's really true. I didn't think of that. Well, he marched on the picket line. Why not go talk to the students who are protesting?
I would.
Yeah. Well, Candy, I want to say thank you for this. Thank you for your time. Good luck with your election tomorrow. Stay safe.
All righty. Thank you.
We are proud to be sponsored by the sales award-winning Donna Frank team of luxury property specialists at Berkshire Hathaway Blake Realtors. Donna is a very old and good friend from my WAMC days, and I can vouch for her skill, energy, and real estate expertise. Check out the Donna Frank team on Facebook, or you can contact her at this email, donnafed, DONAFED, @gmail.com. You will be happy that you did. Karen's Place is a phenomenal 4-bedroom guest house in Bennington, Vermont. Has a private pool, a spa, a fireplace. It's beautiful surroundings. This is the perfect spot to rent if you have a family reunion coming up, a wedding or other special occasion, or for any company events and retreats. And if you mention that you heard about Karen's Place from On the Brink, you will get a special discount. Go to natureblogs.com, please, to see the work of our talented sponsors, Denise and Scott Stoner. This husband-wife duo writes and shoots amazing things about nature. They have traveled around the country, and sometimes they just look up in the sky and get these amazing subjects: birds, landscapes, eclipse, bugs. Nature Logs offers photos, prints, and note cards. And the Stoners also do slide presentations and lectures. You can find out about them at naturelogs.com, naturelogues.com. Sarah Albright, who took over ownership of the Apple Barn and Bake Shop in Bennington not too long ago, has written this great mission statement for her place that I want you to hear. Okay, I know I hate the whole idea of a mission statement, and especially I don't see how it applies to someplace I go to because of their apple and blueberry pies. I get that, but this is a woman who really is taking seriously the landmark business that she has acquired, and she wants to make something of it. I love that. Here's what she wrote. We are continuing a legacy of engaging travelers and the local community alike and strengthening our brand by bridging the divide between education, tourism, and food. We deliver real local Vermont. I love this, and you will too. Please check out theapplebarn, all one word.com.